Okay, how much more, if anything, needs to be done to ensure equal rights for all Americans, regardless of their racial or ethnic backgrounds? A lot, a little, nothing at all.
I'm putting a lot. Oh,
Uh,
and there's a secondary question.
and the follow-up question is, which comes closer for, okay, so let's make it clear to the listener. We both chose a lot. We both feel that there's a lot of systemic racism going on in this country. Kara probably even more extremely so than I do, but I definitely, as the more moderate of the two of us, I will
I do
say
roll that way.
there is a lot of systemic racism in this country that is executed by people who are totally not racist, and a lot of it that is executed by people who very much are. And both of those things need to be addressed. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Which comes closer to your view about what needs to be done to ensure equal rights for all Americans, regardless of their racial or ethnic backgrounds, even if neither is exactly right? They might as well put that on all of the questions.
Yeah.
First, most US laws and major institutions need to be completely rebuilt because they are fundamentally biased against some racial and ethnic groups. Or, while there are many inequities in the United States laws and institutions, necessary changes can be made by working within the current systems.
This is much more tough than the first part of the question.
I don't think so.
I think I would say the first answer, but also it's like, I don't know if I'd say most. I think I'd say a lot, right? Like, I don't know, because what is a
More than 50%,
non-racist?
Kara.
Yeah, okay, maybe it's 51%. So yeah,
That's
I'm gonna
most.
put most.
See, and I say, even if we tore everything down and rebuilt it back as some kind of democracy, it'd still be close to what we're at now. So I don't see a point in dismantling stuff to pull out the biases that come with being a human being. You know, we all pretend like, oh, America's super racist. And if we go other places, that doesn't go on. It is everywhere, man. These other countries, it's much more prevalent here because we're all living together. But I mean, you go to China, there's a lot of racism in China. There's
No, I
just
mean,
not a lot of other races, compared to the, relative to the United States.
my feeling
So
on
I
this.
don't think
Oh, well, go
tearing
ahead.
something down in order to remove the human problem from it, I don't think that's going to work. Sorry, go ahead.
See, I don't think this is really a human problem, though, because I think what we're talking about is basically institutions that are old and were made at a time when the United States was much more racist than it is today. Like, I think, we need a big, like, structural update, to a lot of things and not just because of racism.
Well, like if you think of unemployment, let's say unemployment is systematically or inherently racist, which probably is on some level. I just don't have the understanding to say where it is.
Yeah, me neither, really.
Um, but even then, if you were to take it down and then put something back up, it'd still just be unemployment that is ideally targeting people. So it does seem like you should be able to weed out the problems unless the problems are people. And so that's
Right.
kind of where I'm coming from on that one. But I mean, we don't have to convince one another. But
No, that's true. I think definitely. Yeah, and it's hard because I don't know like a lot about structure. Like there are a lot of institutions,
right, yeah.
I feel like with most institutions you could comb through and could find like some really fundamental laws that it's like, okay, let's change that because laws
Right.
don't change real fast.
Yeah, I'll say that I think the biggest problem with this country is the amount of people that probably took this test and confidently answered all of these like they knew what they were talking.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
probably the biggest problem.
Yeah.
People are, oh, totally, yeah, I know because of this one thing I read. You might
Right.
need to read another thing. Become an expert.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll read a couple.
Okay.
Which of the following statements comes closest to your view? Business corporations make too much profit. Most corporations make a fair and reasonable amount of profit.
I have a feeling we both have the same answer for this one.
Yeah.
And I will say, before Trump got into office, and I don't know if Trump changed this, and I'm not trying to say that, but I'm trying to reference the time period. During the time period running up to Trump running, it really felt like news coverage and on both sides, all kind of had this attitude that corporations just have too much power and they were controlling the situation too much. And then Trump got into office and the right seemed to drop that a bit. And I'm not saying that the right was like all for limiting corporations and stuff, but they at least had the attitude like, yeah, these people got a lot of power that they shouldn't have.
Yeah.
And then that all seemed to get swept under the rug. So I couldn't help but to think that corporations had something to do with it. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely going with too much profit. For a lot of reasons. Here's a fun fact. In like the 19th century and the earlier 20th century, it used to be that like there was basically an ethos that for the government to allow a corporation to exist, it had to have a compelling public interest, right? That was the view for a long time, that corporations are supposed to be private entities that are for profit, but also trying to improve the world. And I feel like in the last 40 years or so, we've kind of just gone from that to they have a responsibility to their shareholders, right? Like we don't care anymore whether they're like helping or even if they're just like actively hurting the world, because we think, oh, that's not their job, that's not their domain. But we used to think it was. That's why we like broke up monopolies and stuff. Well, that and some other reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. That's why I always think it's weird that they consider corporations to be its own entity, because I mean, great, it's its own entity without any sort of ethical or moral compass. It's
right. Like
its own, it's like Bitcoin at that point. It's just its thing out there that is going to decide what it is, and people are going to decide by buying it or selling it, and that's it.
Exactly. It's like a corporation's a person, but it can't go to jail for murder,
Now, don't get me wrong. I understand that in a capitalism, there will be big businesses and there will be small businesses and there will be battle between those businesses. I get that.
Sure. Yeah,
I do. It's just, when those battles start going over state lines, when those battles start going over country lines, when they start influencing the government. I mean, when do you draw the line on what these individual companies can do,
Right. Yeah. And I think it's inevitable that at some point in capitalism, you're going to get businesses start to influence the government because, eventually, like they always need to squeak out more growth. So eventually that's where the growth can be found through bribery. All right. Let me go on to the next one. How much, if at all, would it bother you to regularly hear people speak a language other than English in public places in your community? A lot, some, not much, or not at all?
Does this include when I'm calling to get some sort of service and they don't give me any other option? Because that pisses me off. But for the most part, like if I'm out shopping and somebody's like next to me talking another language, I got to say, it doesn't even cross my mind once. But
right. Yeah.
Like on a capitalist level of realizing that most people speak English in the country and you're trying to provide services to these people, you should probably take that into consideration. So on a legal level, I'm going to say not at all, because I don't even slightly care what people speak. As long as they're not speaking to me, and that's not because they're in a different language, it's because they're not me. I don't want strangers talking to me in public. I don't care what language you talk. Just do it to yourself in public.
If someone comes up to me and like assumes I know Swedish, then that would be weird. But also, I've never had that experience in my life, right? Like, people know I don't speak Swedish.
Right, exactly. I get really frustrated calling for help. Part of it's my own problem. I'll call for help with my computer, and I'm hard of hearing, and then I get somebody with a very thick accent. Usually Middle Eastern, but I'm not coming down on them specifically. You could send me to the Danes and I'd be irritated that I couldn't understand them. I have a hard time understanding my dad's boyfriend sometimes, and he's from Switzerland.
Yeah.
So I get frustrated with that I already can't hear. And now it gets very frustrating, but
they're not even speaking
the frustration
another language.
Is not at this person for speaking another language or for taking an opportunity that was placed in front of them. The frustration is how stupid is this business to have a clientele that speaks one language, but to treat that clientele with a different,
Right.
without
Yeah.
taking that into too much consideration. I don't know how to say it.
It's like mostly English people are going to be calling you, but you can speak Farsi to them. It doesn't matter. Like that's
right.
I'm surprised that's even happened. That's crazy.
It is weird, and it happens a lot, and they tend to alternate it. So they'll outsource it until they get a really bad reputation, and then they'll insource it until they start to win awards, and then they'll outsource it again. Doing this for years, I've
so it's
noticed
a scam.
Yeah, it's kind of a money scam.
Yeah. Then again, that's not even like that's not a public place. So like that's not even.
Oh yeah, good point. All the more so. Then it's definitely I don't care.
Yeah.
Okay, question 8 of 16. Because like, what if they're speaking Esperanto? I mean, that's totally made up. Like Pig Latin. What if they're deaf? I don't know. There's lots of stuff. It's none of your business. Mind your own business, people.
I'd like to tell the committee a little bit about myself. I'm 30 years old. I'm married. I have a 3-year-old son. I was born and raised a Christian, and I still adhere to those principles. Believe it or not, I do not drink, I do not smoke, and I do not do drugs.